Kia ora, my name is Robbie and I'm another white man behind a desk, and today we're going to talk about Israel-Palestine because I love to get death threats in the mail. Now, unless you've been wearing a blindfold for the last several months in some sort of elaborate game of BDSM, you probably know that since Hamas's abduction of Israeli citizens last October, the Israeli government has dropped more than 4 times as many bombs on Palestine as the United States dropped on all of Iraq in 5 years. In the last 6 months, the Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, has forced millions of people from their homes and killed tens of thousands more, roughly half of whom are children. And after the killing of more than 180 aid workers, as reported by the United Nations, it seems the Israeli government is now actively preventing aid from reaching those displaced Palestinians, many of whom are now starving to death. The situation is absolutely fucking horrendous, or, as Joe Biden described it, over the top. And it doesn't matter how bad a situation is, whether it's mildly bad or brutally horrific on a global scale, if things are going badly, it's normal for people to try to distance themselves from the issue. It truly doesn't matter if it's a war crime or a bad smell in the office kitchen. Our first instinct is often to say, hey everyone, this isn't my fault, and frankly, it's got nothing to do with me. But today we're going to examine whether that's true, because it turns out that New Zealand has been heavily involved with this since the start. It turns out the bad smell in the office kitchen is absolutely to do with us. In fact, we have been a strong advocate of heating up the seafood curry in the office microwave since 1947. So, let's go back to the creation of the modern state of Israel to see how much New Zealand is to blame for everything that's happened since. And to do that, we had to check in with a boy named Peter Fraser. Now, as we all know, because New Zealand's civic education is so good, Peter Fraser was our Prime Minister from 1940 to 1949. Fraser moved to New Zealand in 1911, became a wharfie and union activist, joined the New Zealand Socialist Party, and was sent to prison for opposing conscription in the First World War. And knowing my audience like I do, you probably think he sounds pretty cool right about now, because my audience are typically, as we say in the biz, woke lefty cucks. But Peter Fraser, thanks for watching, but Peter Fraser was also staunchly Zionist. He really firmly believed that the Jewish people should have a fixed homeland to escape the genocidal anti-Semitism of Europe. And he also believed that homeland should be in Palestine. Basically, he looked at the genocidal actions of fascists in Germany and the failure of other Europeans to stop it, and thought it was time for Palestine to pay for what they'd done. So the United Nations proposed a simple idea. In order to solve the problem of millions of displaced, vulnerable Jewish citizens, it was time to displace millions of vulnerable Palestinians. A brilliant plan that showed once again why the United Nations is so effective. Peter Fraser, the New Zealand Prime Minister at the time, really liked this idea. He liked it a lot. One academic even argued that by hosting Israel's first Prime Minister on the way to the United States, we actually encouraged him to propose a more radical approach to taking Palestinian land. So, when the proposal for the creation of modern Israel was put to the newly founded United Nations in 1947, New Zealand said yes very enthusiastically. If there had been a shit yes button, New Zealand would have pushed it. And in 1948, Israel announced their independence and started forcing hundreds of thousands of Palestinian people from their homes in what is now known as the Nakba, or the catastrophe in Arabic. The US acknowledged Israeli independence right away, and Fraser really wanted to do the same. Britain asked him not to, and the rest of Peter Fraser's cabinet managed to hold him back. Alistair McIntosh, who was Peter Fraser's principal foreign policy advisor at the time, was quoted as saying that he had to stem the Prime Minister's Zionist exuberance. The fact of the matter is that when the modern state of Israel was created, one of their most enthusiastic supporters was the Prime Minister of New Zealand, a man who is a founding member of the United Nations and was unusually important when it came to international affairs. To be clear, New Zealand never matters in international affairs. We're tiny and irrelevant. But Peter Fraser kind of mattered. He was like a very annoying mosquito, fundamentally irrelevant, but really good at getting your attention. And New Zealand used that attention to expel Palestinian people from their homes. So why? Why was Peter Fraser so into Zionism? Well, the answer is likely the same thing that has motivated white liberals for centuries: guilt and racism. Heady combination. Peter Fraser was understandably and rightly guilty about New Zealand's immigration policy towards the Jewish people from Europe in the 30s and 40s. Under his watch, New Zealand had declined to accept thousands of Jewish refugees fleeing persecution. Walter Nash, who was in Fraser's cabinet and who was also a big fan of Zionism, was once quoted as saying, "There is a major difficulty of absorbing Jewish people in our cultural life without raising a feeling of antipathy to them." And there's no doubt that because of that wildly anti-Semitic attitude and our unwillingness to open our borders to people in need, many Jewish refugees suffered and died. So that's the guilt. That makes sense. But then that raises the question, why would Peter Fraser, who was so ashamed of New Zealand's failure to support displaced Jews from Europe, now be so willing to displace the people of Palestine? Well, in part, it might be due to New Zealand's attitude to Palestinians at the time. New Zealand's Brigade Major Sea Guy Powles, cool name, who was stationed in Palestine, described several happy meetings with English-speaking Jewish colonists, while saying Arabic people were without humour, sympathy, or the elements of cleanliness, and his only smile is one of deceit. Cool take, dude. Similarly, Peter Fraser congratulated the Jewish people for their magnificent service to Palestine, where again, as in biblical days, desert places have been made into pleasant land. And this attitude from officials might go some way to explaining why Fraser was capable of putting the needs of the people of Palestine out of his mind when looking for a way to help the Jewish people. So we definitely helped microwave the fish. And the fundamental question is, over the past 70 years, how much has changed? And what are we doing about it? Over the decades, Israel has occupied more and more Palestinian land. Arabic nations have collectively mounted assaults on Israel, and Israel, with US support, has fought back, in turn claiming yet more land. Over time, the Labour Party became less Zionist than the National Party, as Labour was taken over by politics nerds like Helen Clark and Phil Goff, and National continued to be run by dudes who wanted to get invited to the cool parties paid for by the Americans. Thanks, America. The history of New Zealand and Israel since Peter Fraser is ultimately a history of half-efforts. New Zealand severed diplomatic ties with Israel in 2004 when two presumed Israeli spies tried to get New Zealand passports by fraud, but we also ran away from the opportunity to arrest Israeli war criminal Moshe Yaalon when he visited New Zealand, despite courts saying there was sufficient evidence to do so. We co-sponsored UN Security Council Resolution 2334, stating that Israel's settlements in Palestine were a flagrant violation of international law, but in official statements, we never once acknowledged the vast disparity in power between Israel and Palestine. New Zealand has been using the phrase even-handed to describe our stance on Israel and Palestine since the founding of the nation of Israel, but that clearly isn't the case. We have a student visa exchange program with Israel, but not with Palestine or any other Middle Eastern country. We are one of 55 UN countries that still do not recognize Palestine as a sovereign state. And when asked about this, Luxon said, and I quote, nervous look, stare at podium, look over to Winston Peters, wait for him to speak, and start twiddling thumbs. It's a good statement. He's a good prime minister. The fact is, the government of Israel currently poses an existential threat to Palestine and the Palestinian people. And thanks to Peter Fraser and countless equivocating politicians since, the blood of these people is, in part, on our hands. The UN Security Council has now officially called for a ceasefire, and even the US State Department has agreed that famine is probably present in Gaza. There are 2.2 million remaining Palestinians currently at risk of starvation. The state of Israel is preventing aid from reaching these citizens while bombing their homes in the hopes of claiming their land. In the 1940s, New Zealand should not have exuberantly supported the displacement of Palestinian people, but we did. In the 2020s, we should have supported the ICJ case brought against Israel by South Africa, but we didn't. We should have consistently funded the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, but we didn't. Now, we must recognize Palestine as a state. and be consistent in holding Israel to the level of international law to which we hold every other country. We helped microwave the fish, and the stink is getting worse. Like it or not, it's our job to do something about it. Thank you.